Nobody ever called Danny Herrera a hero. Back on Earth, he drove a cargo truck through wildfire zones in Nevada, delivering water and supplies to evacuation camps. He never carried a gun. He never wore a medal. The only thing he carried from that life was a faded patch from his volunteer fire crew, stitched to the inside pocket of his jacket like a quiet promise he made to himself a long time ago. Now he was out here, hauling freight between stations in a beat-up freighter called the Red Tail, with his co-pilot Bree Tanaka asleep in the seat beside him and nothing but empty space on the scanners. Then the distress signal HIT came screaming across every open channel, automated and desperate. Station Orvo 9 was dying. A reactor meltdown had cracked the station's core, and the whole structure was tearing itself apart from the inside. Fires in 6 sectors. Atmosphere bleeding out through fractures in the hull. Artificial gravity failing in waves. Thousands of beings from dozens of species were trapped inside, and the evacuation had already begun, but it was not going well. Bree woke up the moment the alarm filled the cockpit. She read the data, scrolling across her screen, and looked at Danny. She already knew what he was going to do. "We're not a rescue ship," she said. "We've got room," Danny replied. He was already turning the Red Tail toward the station. When they arrived, the scene was worse than the signal suggested. Orvo 9 was a massive, ring-shaped station, and nearly a third of it was glowing orange from internal fires. Escape pods launched in uneven bursts. Smaller ships crowded the outer docking points, fighting for space. And hanging above it all like a gray blade was the Galactic Union corvette Stillwater, commanded by Captain Ren Diallo. Ren was a Fenrir, tall, gray-skinned, with 4 arms and a face that never seemed to move. He had spent 30 years in Union service, and he ran evacuations by the book. When Danny hailed him and offered the Red Tail as an additional rescue shuttle, Ren paused for a long time before answering. "You are human," Ren said, as if that explained something. "I am," Danny said, "and I've got empty cargo space that can hold 40 people. Let me help." Ren accepted, reluctantly. The evacuation was being coordinated through a priority system, and that was where things got ugly. A Mirati diplomat named Advisor Gullen had been assigned to oversee resource allocation, and he had implemented something called the Species Biological Value Index. It ranked every species on the station by their political importance, population size, and economic contribution to the Union. The species at the top of the list got evacuated first. The species at the bottom waited. The Sorvani were at the bottom. They were a small species. Quiet. Physically fragile, with translucent skin and bioluminescent veins that changed color with their emotions. They had no military, no trade fleet, no political allies. There were only about 40 Sorvani on Orvo 9, most of them workers and families. Nobody important, according to Gullen's index. Danny did not know any of this yet. He was docked to Base 7, helping load evacuees onto the Red Tail, when he heard the transmission that IT was broken and faint, coming from deep inside the station. A female voice, speaking in a language Danny's translator barely recognized. The voice was weak, and between the words there were sounds, small, high-pitched chirps. The sound of children crying. Bree caught it too. She ran the signal through the translator and looked up at Danny with something heavy in her eyes. "It's a Sorvani caretaker," Bree said. "She's in Sector 11. She says she's hurt. She says there are children with her. 3 of them." Danny looked at the station map on his screen. Sector 11 was deep inside the failing ring. The corridor leading to it was already flagged red. Loss of gravity, fire damage, structural collapse in progress. He keyed his comm to the Stillwater. "Captain Wren, there are children trapped in Sector 11. I'm going in." There was a pause. Then Wren's voice came back, flat and careful. "Sector 11 is compromised. Structural failure is imminent. I cannot authorize a rescue mission to that location." Before Danny could respond, another voice cut in. "Gullen, The Sorvani in Sector 11 are not on the priority evacuation list. Allocating resources to retrieve them would delay extraction of higher-value evacuees. Request denied. Danny stared at the comm panel. Bree watched him. Higher value, Danny repeated quietly. Danny, Bree said. She knew that voice. She knew what it meant when he got quiet like that. He stood up. He pulled his emergency pack from the wall. Portable oxygen, a medical kit, thermal blankets, a flashlight. He checked the seals on his boots and gloves. He zipped his jacket and felt the old fire crew patch against his chest. Keep the ship warm, he told Bree. I'll be back. You don't know that, she said. He looked at her. Not with confidence, not with bravery, just with the stubborn, tired certainty of a man who had spent his whole life walking toward the thing everyone else was running from. There are kids in there, Bree. She did not try to stop him. She never could. Danny Herrera stepped off the red tail, walked through the docking corridor, and disappeared into the burning station. Behind him, Bree sat down in the pilot's seat and opened every scanner she had. She would watch him for as long as she could. On the still water, Captain Wren stared at his tactical display and said nothing. Advisor Gullen had already moved on to the next efficiency report, and deep inside Sector 11, 3 small children huddled in the dark, their veins glowing white with fear, waiting for someone to come. Someone was coming. The corridor in his Sector 11 smelled like melting metal and something sharper, something chemical that burned the back of Danny's throat even through his oxygen mask. The emergency lights had failed 2 sections back, and now the only light came from his flashlight and the occasional flicker of a fire burning behind a wall panel. Gravity was wrong here. Not gone completely, but stuttering. Every few steps, Danny felt his weight shift, heavier, then lighter, then sideways for half a second before snapping back. Loose debris floated in lazy circles around him. A child's shoe drifted past his face, and he pushed it aside without looking at it too long. He kept moving. The station groaned constantly, a deep sound that came from everywhere at once, like the bones of some enormous animal slowly breaking. Danny had heard sounds like that before, in burning buildings back in Nevada, in the seconds before a roof gave way. He knew what it meant. It meant hurry. He found them in a supply room at the end of a collapsed hallway. The door had been forced open from the inside, and just beyond it, in the pale blue glow of emergency chemical lights, he saw the caretaker first. She was Sorvani. Small, barely 4 feet tall, with the same translucent skin he had read about in cargo manifests but never seen in person. Her veins, those bioluminescent lines that ran beneath the surface of every Sorvani, were dark. No light, no color. She was lying on her side with her arms stretched out, and beneath those arms, pressed against her body, were 3 children. She had died protecting them. Her body was their shield. Danny knelt beside her and gently moved her arm. The 3 children stared up at him with enormous dark eyes. 2 of them were injured. One had a burned hand wrapped in a torn piece of cloth, and the other had a deep cut along her arm that had been crudely bandaged. They were shaking but alive. The 3rd child was different. She sat perfectly still, pressed into the far corner of the room, her knees pulled to her chest. She was the smallest of the 3. Her skin was almost clear, and the veins beneath it were flickering. White to pale blue to white again, fast and unsteady, like a heartbeat that could not find its rhythm. She was not injured. She was in shock. Danny spoke softly. Hey, it's okay. I'm here to help. His translator converted the words into a rough version of Sorvani common speech. The 2 injured children responded. Small chirps, frightened but responsive. They let him check their wounds. He cleaned the cut on the one child's arm and rewrapped it with proper bandaging from his kit. He applied burn gel to the other's hand and gave them both water from his canteen. The 3rd child did not move. Danny looked at her for a long moment. He had seen this before too. Not in space, but in Nevada, in evacuation shelters after the fires. Children who had seen too much. Children whose minds had stepped back from the world because the world had become too loud and too hot and too frightening that he moved slowly. He crouched in front of her and lowered himself until he was at her eye level. He did not reach for her. He did not try to pick her up. He simply pulled off his glove and held out his bare hand, palm up, fingers open. He did not know what this meant in Sorvani culture. He did not know that among the Sorvani, offering an unshielded hand to a stranger was one of the deepest gestures of trust, a sign that said, I give you the most vulnerable part of me, and I am not afraid. It was something Sorvani parents did with their children. It was something that meant safety. Danny did not know any of this. He was just a man kneeling in front of a scared little girl, offering his hand because it was the only thing he had left to give. The child stared at his hand. Her veins flickered. White, blue, white. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her small fingers against his palm. Her skin was cool, almost cold, and the moment she touched him, the flickering stopped. Her veins shifted from that panicked, unstable white to a calm, steady pale blue. The color of safety, the color of trust. Danny closed his fingers gently around hers. There you go, he whispered. I've got you. She did not speak. She did not chirp like the others. But she held on, and she did not let go. Her name, he would learn later, was Lissa. He gathered the 3 children and began moving. The 2 injured ones could walk, though slowly. He fashioned a simple sled from a broken cargo panel, padded it with thermal blankets, and placed the 2 injured children on it. He pulled it with one hand. Lissa walked beside him, holding his other hand. The station shook. A section of ceiling crashed down 30 meters behind them, and the sound echoed through the corridor like thunder. The 2 children on the sled cried out. Lissa flinched, but did not let go of Danny's hand. Her veins pulsed blue, brighter for a moment, then steady again. Danny kept walking, one step at a time. The fire was getting closer. The air was getting thinner. His oxygen tank was at 60%, and he had already shared some with the children. Bree's voice crackled in his ear. Danny, Sector 11 is accelerating collapse. You need to move faster. I'm moving as fast as 3 kids, and a cargo sled will let me, he said. The corridor ahead, Section 11C, it's flagged. Possible vacuum breach. Danny looked down at Lissa. She looked up at him. Her veins glowed soft and blue. And in that glow, he could see something he had not expected. She trusted him completely. We'll deal with it when we get there, he said. They kept walking. The bulkhead door at the end of Section 11C was sealed shut, and the warning panel beside it was flashing a single word in 3 galactic languages. Vacuum. Danny stood in front of it with 3 alien children behind him and a decision that had to be made in the next 2 minutes. On the other side of this door was a 40-meter corridor that had lost its atmosphere. The hull had cracked somewhere along the ceiling, and the air had been sucked out into space. Beyond that corridor was Section 10, still pressurized, still connected to the docking ring, still a way out. But between here and there was nothing but cold, empty death. Bree's voice came through his earpiece, tight and controlled. Danny, I'm reading full vacuum on the other side. 42 meters. There's an emergency airlock at the far end, but it's manual. You'll have to crank it open by hand. How long can a human survive in vacuum? Danny asked. About 15 seconds before you lose consciousness. You got maybe 90 seconds before it kills you, but after 15, you won't be able to move. Danny looked down at his emergency pressure suit. It was standard cargo class, a single adult-sized suit designed for short-hull repairs. 1 suit, 3 children, 1 adult. The math was simple and terrible that he knelt beside the cargo sled and began working. The 2 injured Sorvani children watched him with wide eyes as he unfolded the suit and spread it open. He sealed the armholes, cinched the neck ring tight, and turned the suit into something it was never designed to be, a pressure bubble, a cocoon, big enough for 3 small Sorvani children if they pressed together. Get in, he said gently, lifting the first child, and placing her inside. Then the second. They curled together, frightened but obedient. Lissa stood beside him, still holding his hand. She looked at the suit, then looked at him. Her veins flickered, a question she could not put into words. "You too, little one," Danny said. He picked her up carefully and placed her inside with the others. She grabbed his finger as he pulled away, and for a moment, she held on tight. "I'll be right behind you," he said. "I promise." He sealed the suit. The internal air supply activated, enough for maybe 5 minutes. The children were safe inside. He could see Lissa's face through the visor, her veins glowing a nervous blue. Danny stood up and faced the bulkhead door. No suit, no protection, just his clothes, his boots, and whatever air was left in his lungs. Bree was shouting in his ear now. "Danny, do not do this. Do not open that door without a suit. The kids are sealed. I need you to have the airlock on the far side ready. Can you access the controls remotely?" "I can try, but Danny, can you access them?" A pause. Then, quieter. "I'll get it open. You just move fast." Danny took 3 deep breaths. On the third, he filled his lungs completely, held it, and hit the manual release on the bulkhead. The door slid open and the world disappeared. The cold hit him first. Not like winter cold, but something deeper, something that reached into his chest and squeezed. The moisture on his skin began to evaporate instantly. His eyes burned. The silence was total and absolute. Because sound does not travel in vacuum, he grabbed the pressure bubble with both hands and pushed. The children inside were weightless now. No gravity in this section, and the bubble floated forward. Danny planted his feet against the door frame and shoved hard, sending the bubble gliding down the corridor toward the far airlock. Then he followed. He pulled himself along the corridor using the wall handles. Every second was a fight. His skin felt like it was being pulled outward. His vision began to blur at the edges. The blood vessels in his eyes started to burst. Tiny red stars spreading across his sight point 10 seconds. The airlock was 20 meters ahead. The pressure bubble had reached it and bumped gently against the door point 12 seconds. His hands were swelling. His joints ached. The air in his lungs was expanding, and he had to let it out or risk rupturing his lungs. He opened his mouth and let the breath go in a silent scream that no one could hear. 14 seconds. His vision was narrowing. The edges of the world were going dark. He could see the airlock door beginning to open. Bree had done it. The bubble was being pulled inside by the pressure difference. 15 seconds. His fingers found the edge of the airlock frame. He pulled himself through just as the inner door began to cycle. Atmosphere rushed in. Sound returned, a roaring, howling flood of air that hit him like a wave. Danny collapsed on the floor of the airlock. He could not see. His eyes were full of blood. His skin was covered in a thin layer of frost that was already melting into something that stung. Every joint in his body screamed, but he was alive. The pressure bubble popped open and 3 small Sorvani children tumbled out. The 2 injured ones crawled to the wall and held each other. Lissa crawled to Danny. She pressed her small hands against his face. Her veins were glowing, not blue this time, but a warm, deep amber. A color Danny had never seen on her before. It was a Sorvani healing reflex, an involuntary response that young Sorvani could not control. Her body was trying to help him the only way it knew how. The warmth of her hands seeped into his frozen skin. It did not heal him, but it told him something words could not. "You saved me. Now I'm trying to save you." Danny smiled. His lips were cracked and bleeding. "I'm fine." He whispered he was not fine, but they were alive, and the docking ring was close that he stood up, took Lissa's hand, and kept walking. The docking ring was chaos. Warning lights flashed in every direction, and the sound of alarms layered on top of each other until the noise became a single, constant scream. Evacuees from a dozen species crowded the corridors, some running, some limping, some carrying others. Danny pushed through them with 3 Sorvani children behind him, his vision still blurred from burst blood vessels, his skin red and raw from vacuum exposure. He could see the red tail. Base 7. The loading ramp was down, and Bree was standing at the top of it, scanning the crowd. When she spotted Danny, the relief on her face lasted exactly 1 second before it turned into something harder. "You look like you got thrown out of an airlock," she said. "Close enough," Danny replied. But they did not make it to the ramp. A line of Mirati soldiers stood between them and Base 7. 6 of them, tall and angular, with smooth white armor and weapons held across their chests. They were not pointing their weapons at anyone. They did not need to. The wall of bodies was enough. Behind the soldiers, standing with his hands folded neatly behind his back, was Advisor Gullen. He was Mirati too. Same pale skin, same sharp features, but dressed in the dark formal robes of a Union diplomat. His expression was perfectly calm. Not cruel, not angry, just efficient, the way a machine is efficient. "This docking corridor is now restricted to priority evacuees," Gullen announced, his voice carrying over the noise. "Remaining berths on outbound vessels are allocated to Tier 1 and Tier 2 species. All others will be directed to secondary staging areas." Danny stopped walking. He looked at the soldiers. He looked at Gullen. Then he looked down at Lissa, who was still holding his hand. "These are children," Danny said. "They are Sorvani," Gullen replied, as though that answered the question. "They are children, and the berths are allocated. I do not make these decisions based on emotion, human. I make them based on the index. The Sorvani rank below the threshold for priority extraction. There are Mirati merchants in the secondary bay whose economic value to the Union far exceeds. You're putting merchants ahead of kids?" Gullen's expression did not change. "I am following protocol." Captain Ren Diallo stood 10 meters away, near the entrance to the main docking hub. He had heard every word. His 4 arms were folded tightly against his body, a Fenrir posture that meant deep discomfort. He had the authority to override Gullen. He had not done it. Danny saw him. Their eyes met. Ren looked away. "Fine." Danny did not raise his voice. He did not argue with protocol or policy or the index. He had never been good with words like that. Instead, he bent down and picked up Lissa with one arm. She weighed almost nothing. Her small hands gripped the collar of his jacket, and her veins glowed a steady, trusting blue. He walked toward the soldiers. They tensed. One of them shifted his weapon slightly, not aiming, but ready. Danny did not stop. He looked directly at Gullen and spoke clearly enough for everyone in the corridor to hear. "You're going to have to shoot me to stop me from putting these kids on my ship." The corridor went quiet, not silent. The station was still groaning, still dying, but every person, every being in that hallway stopped moving and stopped talking and looked at the human holding the alien child. The Mirati soldiers hesitated. They had been briefed on humans. Every species in this sector had heard the stories by now. The endurance, the pain tolerance, the stubbornness that bordered on insanity. They had just watched this man walk through vacuum without a suit and come out the other side still standing. None of them wanted to be the one who shot him. Gullen's mouth opened. But before he could speak, Captain Wren stepped forward. His boots were heavy on the metal floor, and the sound of them cut through the silence like a drumbeat. "Let them through," Wren said. Gullen turned sharply. "Captain, the protocol clearly states I am overriding the protocol," Wren said. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of 30 years of command. "The children board the human ship. Now, I will file a formal complaint with the Union Council." "You do that," Wren said. "After the station finishes exploding." The soldiers stepped aside. Danny walked through them without looking back. He carried Liz up the ramp and into the Red Tail. The 2 other Sorvani children followed, guided by Bree, who wrapped them in blankets and strapped them into passenger seats. Danny set Lissa down in the co-pilot's chair and buckled her in carefully. Her veins pulsed warm amber as he adjusted the straps around her small frame. She reached up and touched his face again, that same healing gesture, gentle and instinctive. "We're okay," he told her. "You're safe now." Then the alarm changed out a new sound, deeper, more urgent. A structural failure warning from the adjacent bay. Bay 6. Danny looked at the scanner and saw the readings. The docking clamps in Bay 6 were failing. The floor was buckling. And there were life signs inside, 4 of them. A Fenrir family. 2 adults, 2 children, trapped. Danny stared at the screen. His legs ached. His ribs hurt with every breath. His eyes were still half blind from the vacuum crossing. He had done enough. Anyone would say he had done enough. He looked at Bree. She was already shaking her head. "No, Danny, no. You can barely stand." He touched Lycia's hand one more time. Then he turned and walked back down the ramp. Bree's voice followed him, cracking. "You don't have to save everyone." But he was already gone. The floor of Bay 6 was splitting open like the skin of a fruit left too long in the sun. Long cracks ran through the metal plating, and through those cracks, Danny could see the faint shimmer of the station's emergency force field, the only thing between the bay and open space. That field was flickering. It would not hold much longer. The Fenrir family was huddled near the far wall. 2 adults, tall, gray-skinned, 4-armed, their posture rigid with fear. Between them were 2 children. One was older, maybe the equivalent of a human teenager, standing on shaking legs. The other was small, barely waist height, clinging to the older child's arm with all 4 of her tiny hands. Danny crossed the bay carefully, testing each step before putting his full weight down. The floor groaned under him. A section behind him gave way entirely, dropping into the crawl space below with a crash that shook the walls. "We need to move," Danny said. His translator converted the words, and the adult Fenrir looked at him with an expression he could not read, something between fear and disbelief. "You are human," the larger adult said. "I am, and that floor is about to be gone. There's an emergency ladder in the access shaft. It connects to the upper service deck. From there we can reach the docking ring." The adult looked at the ladder. It was bolted to the wall of a vertical shaft, rising 3 levels up to a hatch. The rungs were wide enough for Fenrir hands, and the 2 adults could climb. The older child could manage it too, but the small one could not. Fenrir children did not develop full arm strength until late adolescence. The little girl could grip, but she could not pull her own weight. Not for 3 levels. Not with the station shaking like this. Danny did not hesitate. He crouched in front of the child and turned his back to her. "Get on," he said, patting his shoulders. The child looked at her parents. The larger adult nodded slowly. The little girl climbed onto Danny's back, her 4 arms wrapping around his neck and shoulders with a grip that was surprisingly strong for someone so small. "Hold tight," Danny said. "Don't let go no matter what." They started climbing. The 2 adults went first, moving quickly up the ladder with the practiced ease of a species built for climbing. The older child followed, slower but steady. Danny came last, with the Fenrir girl pressed against his back, her face buried between his shoulder blades, his arms burnt, his broken ribs, cracked during the vacuum crossing, though he had not admitted it, screamed with every pull upward. His legs, already exhausted, shook on every rung. Sweat ran into his damaged eyes and turned the world into a red blur 0.1 level up. The shaft rattled. Below them, more of Bay's XS floor collapsed with a sound like a giant crushing tin cans. The emergency force field finally gave out, and the air began to rush downward. Not fast, not yet, but enough to feel the pull 0.2 levels up. The child on his back whimpered. Danny tightened his grip on the rungs and kept climbing. His fingers were slick. His heartbeat hammered in his ears so loud he could barely hear Bree shouting through his earpiece. "Danny, the whole lower section is going. You need to be above level 4 in the next 60 seconds. He climbed faster 0.3 levels. The hatch was right above him. The adult Fenrir had already opened it and were reaching down. The older child scrambled through. Danny pushed upward, one rung at a time, the muscles in his arms failing in small, terrifying increments. The station shook hard. Not a tremor, an impact. Something structural had given way deep inside the ring, and a shock wave traveled through the metal like a punch. The ladder bolts groaned. A support beam to Danny's left cracked with a sound like a gunshot. The platform beneath his feet, a small maintenance ledge he had been bracing on, broke away in that half second. Danny did the only thing his body knew how to do. He reached up with both hands, grabbed the Fenrir child from his back, and threw her upward. The little girl flew. Her forearms stretched out, reaching, and the adult Fenrir above caught her. All four of their arms locked around her body and pulled her through the hatch. Safe. Danny had nothing left to hold. He fell 0.2 levels down. His body hit a collapsed beam first, which broke his fall enough to keep him alive, but also broke his left leg in 2 places. He bounced off the beam and landed on what remained of the base 6 floor, a section of plating barely 3 meters wide, surrounded by open gaps that looked down into the exposed underbelly of the station. That he could not move his legs. He felt a sharp, wet pain in his right side and looked down to see a metal shard, a piece of the broken beam, buried in his torso just below his ribs. The blood was dark and it was coming fast. The air was getting thin. The breach below was pulling atmosphere out of the shaft. Danny. Bree's voice was raw. Danny, report. He reached for his comm with a hand that shook badly. It took him 3 tries to press the button. Kids are safe, he said. His voice was barely a whisper. The Fenrir girl made it. Tell Ren. I'm sending a team, Bree. He stopped her with just her name. The way he said it, quiet, tired, final, made her go silent. Take the children. Get them out. Don't wait. Don't you do this. Tell Lissa. He paused. His breathing was shallow now. The edges of his vision were folding inward. Tell her the light in her hands was warm. The comm went silent. On the red tail, Bree pressed her hand against the console and did not move for a very long time. 6 months later, Bree Tanaka stood in a hall she never expected to see. The Grand Assembly Chamber of the Galactic Union's Central Station was enormous. A curved amphitheater carved from pale stone, filled with delegates from over 100 species. Flags and banners hung from the ceiling in colors she did not have names for. The air smelled faintly of something sweet, like flowers from a world she had never visited. She was wearing her cleanest jacket. Danny's fire crew patch was in her pocket. They had recovered his body from the wreckage of Orvo, 3 weeks after the evacuation. The fires had burned for days, and the rescue teams could not enter the collapsed sections until the structure was stabilized. When they finally reached Base 6, they found him on a piece of broken flooring barely large enough to lie on. He had bled out. The medical teams said he had probably lived for another 10 or 15 minutes after his last transmission, alone in the dark, with the air thinning around him. He had not tried to call for help again. His comm was still in his hand, but the last signal it sent was the one to Bree. The Sorvani were the ones who started it. For a species with no military, no trade fleet, and almost no political influence, they moved fast. Within weeks of the evacuation, the Sorvani government, a small council of elders on a quiet colony world, submitted a formal petition to the Galactic Union. They proposed the creation of a new designation, one that had never existed before in galactic law: guardian species. The definition was simple. A guardian species was any species that consistently and voluntarily risked the lives of its own members to protect others, without expectation of payment, political advantage, or reciprocity. A species that ran toward danger not because it was ordered to, but because someone on the other side needed help. The petition named humanity as the first candidate. The debate in the assembly lasted less than a day. Delegates from dozens of species spoke. Some told stories of humans they had met, cargo haulers who stayed behind during storms, medics who worked without sleep, Engineers who crawled into burning wreckage because someone was still alive inside. Others cited data. The number of human volunteers in galactic disaster zones. The percentage of human ships that responded to distress calls compared to any other species. Captain Ren Dialo spoke. He stood at the center of the chamber with his 4 arms at his sides and his voice steady. I have served the Galactic Union for 30 years, he said. I have coordinated evacuations on 11 stations and 4 colony worlds. I have worked alongside every major species in this sector. And I have never, not once, seen a species that runs toward danger the way humans do. They do not do it for glory. They do not do it for territory. They do it because there is someone on the other side who is afraid, and they cannot walk away from that. I do not fully understand it, but I have seen it, and I will not forget it. The vote was unanimous. Every species, every delegate, every council member, even the Mirati voted in favor. Advisor Gullen was not present. He had been quietly reassigned to an administrative post on a station so remote that most star maps did not bother to label it. Humanity became the first guardian species in galactic history. Bree watched the vote from the guest gallery. She did not clap. She did not cry. She just sat there with her hands in her lap and thought about a man who used to drive a water truck through wildfire smoke because someone needed a drink. After the ceremony, she visited Lissa. The girl was living with a Sorvani foster family on a colony called Dren's Landing, a green, quiet world with shallow oceans and soft rain. She had grown a little in 6 months. Her veins glowed a calm, steady blue most of the time now. She had started speaking the common galactic tongue. When Bree knelt in front of her, Lissa looked at her with those enormous dark eyes and said the first full sentence she had ever spoken in a language that was not her own. He held my hand. Bree pulled her close and held her. She did not say anything. There was nothing to say. At the memorial wall on the Union Central Station, they had carved the names of every person who died during the Orvo 9 evacuation. Danny's name was there, along with a list of the people he had saved. 7 names, 3 Sorvani children, a Fenrai family of 3, 2 adults, and 1 little girl who was now learning to climb on her own. And 1 more name that Bree had to dig through the station's records to find. A maintenance worker Danny had pulled from a burning corridor on his way to Sector 11. He had never mentioned it. He had not thought it was worth mentioning. Bree placed the old fire crew patch on the wall beside his name. It was faded and worn, and it smelled faintly of Nevada dust. She pressed it flat against the stone and held it there for a moment. "You did good," she whispered. Behind her, Lissa stood with her foster family. Her veins glowed a steady, warm amber, the color that meant safe in Sorvani biology. The color that meant someone I trust was here. In the months that followed, something changed across the galaxy. It was not loud. It was not sudden. But slowly, quietly, species began to tell their children a new kind of story. They told them that somewhere out in the dark between the stars, there were humans. And if you were ever lost, if you were ever afraid, if the station was burning and no one else was coming, the humans would come. They would always come.